Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of the Scrimshaw Show. My name is Scrimshaw. Sorry for not doing one of these for a little while, but I've been doing quite a lot of other people's podcasts, and the energy to do a solo pod just didn't exist. Listen to me on the Politics Matter podcast with my friend Ryan Jakubowski. I've done, two have been released so far. Two more are coming, but basically I've been on the show a lot recently and will continue to be. We're doing a series of deep dives into all the Senate races in the U.S., so if you're curious about sort of like longer form thoughts and how I got to where to my current thinking on the Senate map, you can go listen to that series. We've done Georgia and Pennsylvania. We've recorded Nevada already. And we recorded an Arizona podcast, and that it didn't record, so we're going to have to re-record that one. I did the Politics podcast with Justin Robert Young last week. So that was pre-row. We talked a lot about the Senate. So you can go back to listen to that. You can also listen to me and Justin arguing about how dependent the Vegas economy is on the Las Vegas Raiders, which hilariously one of those things that like should not matter but absolutely could matter for determining Senate control. And I don't know if it's going to get released. I don't know if I'm breaking like news by saying this, but Max Fawcett's podcast is actually going to like happen soon, and him and I recorded like a demo version of the pod, which I have no idea if will ever be released publicly, but that was fun to chop it up with Max. So yeah, I recorded like 6 podcasts last week. It was outrageous. But anyways, follow me on Twitter at eScrimshaw. Follow the show on Twitter at Scrimshaw_show. Buy my book, Salvation of the Storm. It's available on Amazon, both as a paperback and as an ebook. I have not read Salvation in a while, but it's very good. You should read it. You should buy it. You should support your local independent crazy person who somehow managed to write a book. Who managed to write 3 different books last year while also covering 2 election campaigns, one of which I covered way better than the other. And I think we're going to start with the country that I did not cover very well last year, the United States of America, because if you read my weekly betting column over at thelines.com, you'll find something out. I think Democrats are Senate favorites again. I've been sort of edging towards this position even before Friday's ruling in Dobbs, which I cannot believe I'm about to say those words, overturned Roe versus Wade and subjected American women to the will of the states, which was a dead certainty that it was going to be a horrific circumstance because we know what laws states already had on the books. But I digress. Dobbs, in all of its fucking abominable legal language, had sort of like reignited the fire of like, so what the fuck is going to happen, and is this an opening for the Democratic Party to win in 2022? I'm not optimistic enough to think they could win the House. You would need like a Democratic environment, a fairly sizable Democratic environment to do that. I don't see a scenario where that's possible. Not with Joe Biden's approval in the, mid-30s with white voters. Because as everyone always loves pointing out to me, yeah, well, the approval stuff's wrong because, like, there's a lot of voters who disapprove but will vote Democratic. Sure, there's definitely some of that amongst, like, African-American and Hispanic voters. I do not think the GOP are going to get 35% of the black vote, which is, like, what some polls show Joe Biden's black disapproval is going to be. But the idea that a president with 39% of the vote, his party is going to win the national popular vote in a midterm is absurd. Okay, so what are you looking at in terms of results then? What you're looking at is, like, could they win the Senate? And the thing about the Senate map is there's basically 4 states that matter. Democrats are going to win New Hampshire. That's 47 seats for them. They're not losing Colorado. They're not losing Washington. They're just not. So they can be, like, reasonably confident to very confident of 47 seats. The GOP can be reasonably confident of 49 seats. Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, Nevada. That is the 4 states that constitute the, like, meaningful Senate map. But what about Ohio? What about North Carolina? What about Wisconsin? If the GOP are losing those, that's we'll deal at that point. Like, we will deal with the results of my happiness. I'm confident in saying the GOP have 49 Senate seats. The thing about it is Democrats have to defend a state they won by 0.2% in Georgia, a state they won by 0.3% in Arizona, and a state they won by 2.4% in Nevada. Right? That's not a good map. That said, it's probably one of the best maps you could be defending, right? Because if you compare that to the map that Republicans, like, there's no race that Democrats are like immediately obviously gonna lose, right? They don't have to defend anything, any state in Trump won territory, right? They got nothing. You look at something like Colorado in 2020. You look at something like Illinois in 2016. You look at all of the states that like Indiana, Missouri, North Dakota, Florida, West Virginia, Montana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, right? Like, all of those were states where the party who held the Senate seat had to defend in a state won by the other party at the last presidential election. Democrats don't have that. They're only defending Biden terrain. They're defending their two most vulnerable states on paper are two left-trending states, Georgia and Arizona. Both of them just ran 2 years ago. So both of them have shown electoral prowess in the Trump era. And Nevada, for its closest on paper, there is an argument at the very least that Nevada is basically to Republicans what North Carolina is to Democrats, which is it'll be close, but you can't win it reliably. And there's definitely a case for that. The basic argument is that I think Nevada's going to be fine, because you have to remember that Joe Biden didn't spend any time there, didn't spend any energy there, and of all the places on earth where a lack of canvassing and turnout operations for Democrats might have hurt the party, it's probably amongst Vegas service workers, right? The pandemic did have a chilling effect on Vegas's economy, probably more than most places on earth. Biden didn't spend any time there, and Biden did not spend any time doing Hispanic outreach. Catherine Cortez Masto should do better with Las Vegas Hispanics than Joe Biden did. As a, Hispanic incumbent senator, she should do better than Joe Biden did. If that's the case, then what you're looking at in terms of an effective margin is closer to 3-4%. Maybe incumbency doesn't matter that much. Maybe Adam Laxalt is a good candidate, but we know he's not a great one, given that he lost the governorship in 2018. He couldn't even win his home base of Washoe. CCM ran even with Hillary Clinton as a non-incumbent, replacing Harry Reid. I think it's I feel fairly confident that's seat 48. Seat 49 is Georgia. I know I've gotten a lot of things wrong in the U.S. recently. I've gotten Georgia right a lot. I've been very comfortable calling the Georgia elections right. I got the runoffs right. I got the press right. I was one of the first people to identify Georgia as a possible pickup for Democrats. I pointed out why Democrats were going to do better in the state. I was on the double barrel for the Senate. Democrats were going to pick it up train pretty fast. Georgia is probably the only thing in the U.S. that I'm actually good at predicting. I feel confident Raphael Warnock is going to win. Herschel Walker has undiagnosed CTE, is a bumbling idiot, has 3 secret kids, and has no actual idea what he's doing. Oh, and he's an alleged domestic abuser. Warnock and Abrams are good candidates for black turnout. I think the party's going to be fine. Then we get to Arizona and Georgia. Or Arizona and Pennsylvania. I'm going to start with Pennsylvania because I don't know what to do here. I'm going to be totally honest with y'all. I don't know what I'm even thinking anymore. Do I think John Fetterman's a good candidate? Yes. Do I think he's a good enough candidate to win in an R-leaning environment? know is Dr. Oz. Am I possibly massively overrating Dr. Oz as a candidate because his approvals are absolute dog shit? And I'm still like, oh, he'll be a fine general election candidate. 1,000%. I still have Republicans favored here, but that's mostly just because I don't want to admit I was wrong because of state polls. Because there's been a D+9, a D+6, and a D+4 poll, 3 polls showing those results. The the D+4 was a Republican internal. Although I will say that Signal is a good pollster. So, I don't immediately just do the add 4 points for an internal poll bullshit that you can do with PPP or whoever else. The thing I sort of keep coming back to is just I don't know the answer to the question that gets me to how does Fetterman win? The answer is Dr. Oz is actually really unpopular, and I just don't. It might just be me not wanting to take the L on that, because right now he has a 30-point disapproval, net disapproval, but maybe. But for now, I'm leaving that elite Republican. So let me get to Arizona. Blake Masters, the Trump-endorsed and Peter Thiel bankrolled presumptive Republican nominee, is a lunatic. He is an abortion absolutist in a state that's 60% pro-choice, in a state where when Republicans win, it's because socially liberal, pro-choice, pro-small government tax cut voters vote for the party of small government and tax cuts, and not because they don't really care about social issues. When you raise the salience of abortion rights, you are going to end up in a position where it will be harder for people to vote for a party that actively promotes itself as a pro-life party in a state where they try and claim that they're the most pro-life state in the nation. You get to a situation where the GOP, the Romney-Biden voters that swung Arizona, the way Republicans win the state back is they hold a lot of them. Is they don't do worse in the suburbs, and they maybe even do a little bit better in the suburbs, depending on what you think is going to happen vis-a-vis Hispanic voters. The problem for Arizona Republicans is when you raise the issue salience of abortion as opposed to, say, economics, because on economics, Romney-Biden voters agree with the Republicans, and on social issues, they agree with Democrats, and they're more voting Democrats now because social issues, the salience of social issues has increased in terms of deciding vote choice. The reason Republicans are still a viable political party in the U.S. is because 60% of the country, despite the fact that 60% of the country is pro-choice, is because Republicans do better with pro-choice voters than Democrats do with pro-life voters. Democrats get about a quarter of the vote with pro-life voters. Republicans get about a third of the vote with pro-choice voters. And that's how you get pro-choice jurisdictions voting for the pro-life parties. Some or all of the time, depending on the jurisdiction. For me, I think Roe has had some impact. There's a few polls right now. The sort of, I think, average shift is about 3 points to the left in terms of vote choice. On the direct ballot, that's from a limited group of pollsters. We are going to wait for more. More importantly, I'm sort of waiting for some of the pollsters who have had bigger Republican margins in the past to see if we're seeing a bigger swing. But the argument for Democrats has been the thing is, it's really hard to get Mark Kelly to a point where he's going to win if it's an R4 environment. It's really hard to math your way to incumbency, and Blake Masters being a shitty candidate being worth 8 points. Even if you want to throw in left trends, okay, so it's a 6.5 point swing. So that's what you need to make up for with candidate quality. Okay, but if it's a neutral natural environment, or an R1 national environment, That's assuming the swing stays the same and that it stays through the fall, which I'll get to in a second. It's a lot easier for me to see, like, oh, so I just need Kelly to be, like, worth 3 points? Oh, yeah, I can see that. Right? The reason I think this is going to stay an issue is that, like, one, Democrats really don't want to talk about inflation, so they're going to be talking about abortion a ton. And two, states are going to, like, do things, right? We're going to have legislative fights, either in blue states expanding access or red states further restricting access. We're going to have lawsuits about access. We're going to have horrific stories about the impacts of these draconian laws on women's futures and women's lives. And if we're in a situation where abortion is just like in the news on a daily basis, and maybe there's some easing of gas prices, maybe, you can see a situation where, like, I think like a neutral political environment is in play now. And I think if you're sort of taking more of the, like, R4, R5 off the table, and you're sort of, even if you just shift down to like a 1 or 2 R plus 1, R plus 2 expectation, with the GOP's shitty candidates and the pro-life majorities in the specific Senate states, it matters. And the fact that even if I'm wrong about Arizona, I am, I think, now lower on Democratic chances in Pennsylvania than Market. You know, I think we're in a situation where Democrats are in good shape. What terrifies me is, like, oh, am I just doing this because I want Democrats to win? Like, yeah, I have no idea. Like, if you want to discount what I have to say about the U.S. because, like, 2021 in Texas, you know, blue Texas in 2020, like, you could firmly believe that. I'm mostly not, like, I don't believe any of the, like, Democratic fringe stuff. Like, I don't believe Ohio, I don't believe North Carolina, I don't believe Wisconsin. I will believe those on election night when the AP calls them. That said, I think, like all the context around the year and the environment off the table, like, this is just like a really easy Senate map for Democrats to defend, and I kind of think they'll be able to pull it off. I don't feel like super strongly about it, but yeah, they're probably favorites to win the Senate right now. The other thing we're going to talk about on this podcast is this Justin Trudeau RCMP undue influence pressure allegation. For those who have been living under a rock, which is frankly where I wish I had been, an RCMP superintendent's notes claim that Brenda Lucki, who's the RCMP commissioner, was pressured, voiced her displeasure with the superintendent for not releasing the names of the guns used in the 2020 Portapique massacre down in Nova Scotia. In this officer's versions of events, Lucki had a conference call with them. She reamed them out for not releasing the names because she had made Bill Blair a promise. This version of events is corroborated by a letter signed in April of 2021 that came out today from RCMP Head of Strategic Communications, Leah Scanlon, who I think is most famous for saying that she was proud of the way her team handled the communications vis-a-vis the Portapique shooting, and that they wouldn't have done anything differently. We will get into why she is an incompetent chucklefuck in 2 seconds. The Liberals have denied that they put pressure, that there was any promise. They've denied all of it. I believe them, because of how incompetent and how much of a lie, how much of liars the Nova Scotia RCMP have been. Right? So Leah Scanlon says that she would do nothing differently, and that she's proud of the team. This is the people who did not release an emergency alert when there was a gunman overnight, when there was a gunman out there, like there was an active shooting incident. She then worked from home, because remember, this is peak COVID. This is like peak first COVID lockdowns. She then starts working from home at 6. She gets some information about a cruiser because he used basically a souped up, I think it's a Ford Taurus, which is a cop car, but like it was a fake one. So she was given this information around 8. She didn't tweet it until like there was a delay there. There was a delay getting a bunch of information out, and again, they're using Twitter and Facebook for this information. And fucking bastion of old people Porta Peak, which we can get into in a minute. But like, this is a woman who claimed that she did not review her notes about any of this until the fall of 2021, but then she writes a letter in April 2021. That doesn't make any sense. Like, this is a department who assigned one, like, family support officer, or whatever the official title is, to the victims, to all the civilian victims, but then put 2 bereavement officers to the family of the one cop who died. This is the same force whose explanation to a family member of why their father was found outside without his shoes on is that sometimes gunfire causes your shoes to like fly off. This is the same organization that said that a grieving widower couldn't get his wife's things back because they had to see if the shooter had any connection to her, which he viewed as implying a romantic affair. This is the same force who has not answered any questions about whether or not the shooter had any connection to the RCMP, despite the fact that a 2020 Maclean's article pointed out that the shooter took out $475,000 in cash, which is, according to 2 independent senior anonymous Mounties, the way they pay off agents and confidential informants, and literally have lied about how much information they know at basically every step of the way for the last 2 years. I've been tweeting about this. I've written an article about it. I will have written another one after I record this podcast, which may or may not be done by the time this podcast goes live. Like, the list of RCMP lies at this point is very, very long. This is a force that does not deserve to, well, exist. But B, and this is much more importantly, it does not deserve to be uncritically reported on. Do I believe that Justin Trudeau and Bill Blair could have done this? Sure. In a vacuum, is the idea that Justin Trudeau and Bill Blair would find it within themselves, find it morally acceptable to lean on the head of the RCMP, to lean on the superintendent, to release the names of the guns, to help them gain public pressure and public support for an order in council banning guns? Yes. Is it maybe a little distasteful to have released to have released the order in council banning the guns like 2 weeks after the tragedy? Maybe. There are people in my life who think this. I couldn't give less of a fuck. Whatever. If your argument is that the Liberals needed the names of the guns out there to garner support for the order in council banning the guns, which, by the way, if you were looking for a political upside, maybe don't ban the guns right when everyone's in COVID and nobody gives a shit about fucking gun control legislation. But I digress. According to the version of events that we have from the RCMP, the timeline, right? The commissioner had wanted the number of deaths released the day after the shooting. That shooting, the superintendent in Nova Scotia told the guy who was doing the press conference not to release the number of names. Then the commissioner had to go to the fucking Ottawa Press Gallery to tell reporters herself the numbers. So she was already pretty fucking pissed at them. Because apparently the Nova Scotia branch of the RCMP thinks it's okay to disobey a direct order from the commissioner of the RCMP. Why? I don't know. I'd love someone to fucking ask some questions about that. But apparently no one cares. So then, allegedly, an order comes through from Lucky to put the names of the guns out there, which they again disobey, allegedly, on the basis of operational security. Then there's a press conference and she rips them to shreds. She screams at them, she belittles them, she reprimands them. It's apparently very vicious. Some people were crying. I don't give a fuck. Do your jobs properly, you incompetent fucks. That is my response to the RCMP. If that makes Stephen Marr call me hard-hearted, as he did Brenda Lucky, well, fuck you, Stephen. Maybe you should do your fucking job and continue, which you used to do very well, continue reporting on the failure of the Nova Scotia RCMP. But this is the thing, right? If the argument was the Liberals needed the names of the guns out there to sell the gun control package, and then the local RCMP said no, why did the Liberals release the names themselves? Why didn't they give it to the National Post? Because we knew they had the names. We know that, and we know that the specific names of the guns came out in the National Post in the fall of 2020 when the briefing that the Prime Minister got from his National Security Advisor was given to the Post under Freedom of Information law. Okay. The Liberals clearly did not need to get names of the guns out there to sell their gun control package because, well, the names of the guns weren't out there and the gun control package went through anyways. So, we can talk about the dumbness of the argument. We can talk about all of this. I want to talk about the Canadian media, because of course I do. Because fuck the Canadian media. The Canadian media are the worst. The Canadian media need to be, like, summarily fired from their jobs, because they aren't doing it at this point. Like, do I want to defend Justin Trudeau? Not really. Do I like Justin Trudeau? Not really. Did I vote for Justin Trudeau last time? No. Did I vote for Justin Trudeau the time before that? No. Am I saying, did I vote for Justin Trudeau in some, like, very esoteric way of, like, only the people of Papineau get to vote for Justin Trudeau? No. I'm using it like in the common parlance because I'm not a fucking parliamentary verbiage snob, and I think the people who do are assholes. I did not vote for the Liberals because of SNC. If you think that I am too harsh on the Liberals because of that fact, and if you think that me thinking SNC is a bad thing is bad, well, fuck you. This is who I am, and I believe this to be bad. I also believe we was bad. Now, in both cases, I still did not vote for the Conservatives. I voted Green in 19, and I voted NDP in 2021. But I could not vote for the Liberal Party over this. I think the Liberal Party has a problem of arrogance. I think that the people who permeate high-ranking places in the Liberal government, not necessarily Trudeau and Katie Telford, or, Jerry Buttsbeck when he was there, but, like, I do think there's a sort of, like, culture in liberalism that is extremely arrogant. I've been around the Ontario Liberal Party enough, and there's a lot of, shared people between those two groups. And the thing I sort of keep coming back to is I don't really know what the answer is. I mean, I do know what the answer is. It's that the Canadian media needs to be, like, stripped to the bones and have, like, mostly new people hired for everything. But the, like, real problem with all of this is just, like, I just don't understand how we've gotten to a point where, like, we know the Nova Scotia RCMP are lying. Or at the very least, we know they have lied a lot. Right? And for some reason, we're supposed to pretend that they aren't liars. We're supposed to just, like, uncritically take what they're saying at face value. Despite the fact that we know they have lied about how much information they've had during the investigation repeatedly. Right? We know this. This is just, like, quantifiable fact at this point. We also know that Leah Scanlon is a crazy woman. Like, if you think someone who claims that they would have done nothing differently about the communication of information during that crisis, a crisis prolonged almost entirely because of operational incompetence and people not knowing what the fuck was going on, then you need to be, like, you should not be allowed with other humans. I don't care if it was traumatizing for you. The notion that you think that you did nothing wrong and that you wouldn't change a thing, the literal quote, by the way, wouldn't change a thing, is a dead-ass quote. I'm sorry, you do not get to be a credible witness on this. Like, they have lied before, they have said crazy things before, but we're just pretending that's not the case, right? It's like taking, I was going to shit on Angus Reid, but like even their 2021 polls were like a lot better, right? It's like taking like the worst, most biased partisan pollster in the U.S. on either side, right? And just taking their words at gospel value just because you really, really want it to be true, right? Like, just uncritically reporting things from people who are bullshit artists is not, it's not good journalism, right? Writing up Leah Scanlon's claim without pointing out her history and who she is, and just reporting her as RCMP, whatever the fuck her title was, is not good journalism. Reporting anything that comes out of the mouths of anyone in the Nova Scotia RCMP without attaching a list of statements about how that organization is not fit for purpose is journalistic malpractice. And it's happening in almost every news organization, almost every day at this point. The Globe and Mail wrote a whole article about how Superintendent Darren Campbell, the guy who claimed that Lucky was pressuring him, who, again, we literally know disobeyed a direct order from his superior, got a glowing write-up in the fucking Globe and Mail last week talking about how good of an officer he is. Is he? Is he? I mean, he clearly can't be that good of an officer given that, he's the superintendent who, in part or in full, could not get the situation under control. So, how good of a cop is he really when he was the superintendent, on board the biggest shooting death? I am genuinely trying to think if we've lost more people in one civilian shooting in Canadian history. Have we? Dawson College wasn't this many. École Polytechnique wasn't this many. The Eden Center Boxing Day shooting wasn't this many. Yeah, like one of the, if not the biggest shooting in Canadian history. So clearly can't be that good of a cop. But anyways, I'm just digressing and shitting as the Nova Scotia RCMP, which is totally fair because they fucking suck. But at some point, it's the Canadian media's fault for buying into a story that's just like fundamentally bullshit. Think about this for even 2 seconds and the Liberals don't have a motive to lie. Think about this for 2 seconds and the Nova Scotia RCMP have every motive to lie. And think about this for another 2 seconds and you'll realize that even the supposed Liberal motive to lie doesn't hold up because they didn't even fucking release the name themselves. They did not release the name until much after the gun control order in council had already fucking happened. So now, if you want to argue that the Liberals did this, bring me some fucking proof. And in the words of people who have all incentive to lie and all incentive to not have it pointed out how fucking incompetent they were, yeah, that ain't fucking proof of the sum of jack and fucking shit. And the Canadian media has to get their shit together or I'm going to have a fucking aneurysm. With that, thank you for listening to this week's edition of the Scrimshaw Show. My name is Evan Scrimshaw. Follow me on Twitter at @Scrimshaw. Follow the show on Twitter at @Scrimshaw_show. Listen to the Politics Matter podcast with my friend Ryan Jakubowski. It's been a lot of me recently. It will continue to be a lot of me on the podcast moving forward. But follow him on Twitter at Ryan Jakubowski. I don't know what the podcast name is. I tweet out the podcast all the time. Just follow the podcast account at the same time. Buy my book Salvation in the Storm, and read my CFL. I just realized I do CFL picks now for the lines too. Yeah, still profitable after 3 weeks. Had a rocky week 3. Fuck, what team was it who fucking kicked the field goal? Fucking Edmonton. Yeah, fuck you, Edmonton, for kicking that meaningless fucking field goal and costing me the cover in that game. Fuck you. Anyways, I think I'm betting the Red Blacks on Thursday night. I feel very good. They're going to cover the 4.5, and they're probably going to win the game outright. So yeah, CFL betting, politics betting over the lines as well. Yeah, have a good week.